Welcome to my Omnia Vincit Dialectica podcast. I'm Dr. Ariel Humphrey. Today, I will be talking about international freshwater law, or more precisely, about what happens when there is a lack of international freshwater law, when it comes to transboundary rivers flowing through several countries, with one of these countries being more powerful than the others. I will be focusing on several different rivers, but only on two countries, namely China and Egypt, because they both recently attempted to adopt various hydro-hegemonic behaviors towards their neighbors in the management of the shared transboundary rivers, due either to territorial disputes or to hydropower dam projects severely affecting downstream river flows. This explains why, in these cases, there is an absence of transboundary river basin cooperation agreement, and as a result, there is no multilateral river basin organization, including the hegemonic or superpower country. First, let's define the concept of hydro-hegemony at river basin level. Hydro-hegemony means that a powerful state actor exploits to its benefit only existing power asymmetries within a weak international institutional and legal context through water resource control strategies such as water capture, water integration, water diversion, water containment, or through military threats. In the case of China, we're in the presence of an upstream riparian state. In the case of Egypt, we're in presence of a downstream riparian state. But both countries have been trying to adopt hydro-hegemonic behaviors in the past. But let's examine whether, for real, China is a hydro-hegemon or not, and if Egypt is a hydro-hegemon or not, in fact. We will start by focusing on the Nile River and look at the most significant and impactful treaty which best illustrates Egypt's hydro-hegemony over its upstream neighbors over the last 90 years. I'm talking about the 1959 bilateral agreement between Egypt and Sudan on the full utilization of the waters of the Nile. With this agreement, Egypt, in its capacity as downstream but most powerful riparian state, asserted its hydro supremacy over weaker upstream riparian states. This 1959 agreement is characterized by its inequity and unfairness regarding the allocation and utilization of water in the Nile River basin. It enabled asymmetrical Nile water sharing to the sole benefit of Egypt and Sudan through one striking manifestation, namely the construction of the Egypt-based High Aswan Dam and Reservoir called Lake Nasser, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world, which only benefits Egypt and Sudan. Until today, Egypt still insists that its rights to a disproportionate share of the Nile waters as acquired under this 1959 agreement remain valid. As of 1999, all the Nile River's riparian states, including Egypt and Sudan, started working together on the development of a cooperative framework agreement intended to replace this 1959 agreement. The drafting of that treaty was completed in 2010, and it was then signed by Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Burundi. However, it is still rejected by Egypt and Sudan. The sticking point being Article 14b, which concerns water security. This Article 14b of this cooperative framework agreement provides that Nile basin states therefore agree in a spirit of cooperation not to significantly affect the water security of any other Nile Basin state. Egypt and Sudan, in order for them to accept to sign this cooperative framework agreement, requested, however, that this Article 14b be modified. They proposed another phrasing which reads as follows. Nile Basin states therefore agree in a spirit of cooperation not to significantly affect the water security and current uses and rights of any other Nile Basin state. In other words, they want the new treaty to kind of comply with the previous 1959 agreement, which granted outrageous rights to Sudan and Egypt. Of course, the other countries did not agree with that, so we are at a deadlock right now. Despite the disagreement about this Article 14b between Egypt and other upstream countries like Ethiopia, the latter went ahead and started in 2011 the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and Reservoir located 14 kilometers east of the border with Sudan. The purpose of this Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is electricity production to relieve Ethiopia's energy shortage and for electricity export to neighboring countries. This hydropower dam will be able to produce 5.15 gigawatts, which will make it the largest hydroelectric power plant in Africa when completed and among the 20 largest in the world. Egypt has considered military options to prevent the completion of that Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam for a number of years. But so far, Egypt never acted on its military threats against Ethiopia. But the more Ethiopia feels the reservoir linked to the hydropower dam, the higher the tension gets between the two countries. Indeed, the filling of the reservoir is considered by Egypt as an existential threat, as it fears the dam will negatively impact Egypt's water supplies. So the question is Egypt truly showing hydro-hegemonic behaviors towards Ethiopia in particular? Time will tell. Indeed, maybe the two parties will soon come to an agreement on the way they want to develop and manage the Blue Nile, as you can see it on the map. Okay, next, let's look into Asia. We're going to focus on China now. We will together look into how China behaves as an upstream riparian state when it comes to the three distinct transboundary river systems which find their sources in Tibet, namely the Mekong River System, the Brahmaputra River System, and the Indus River System. Here is the context when it comes to the shared Brahmaputra and Indus River systems in particular. We will talk about the Mekong River a bit later. China and India are rival rising superpowers with enormous populations and competing water demands. Several territorial disputes currently exist between China and India. Those disputes are about two territories. First, the Arunachal Pradesh region through which the Brahmaputra flows, and the Aksai Chin region, also called Ladakh region in India, crossed by the Indus River and its tributaries, the Shyok and Galwan River. Because of these disputes, the relationship between China and India has deteriorated. The two countries do not have any agreement in place governing the management of waters of the Indus River system and of the Brahmaputra River system. Both originate in the Chinese-controlled Tibet. China is what we call a completely upstream riparian state. It shares more than 50 major transboundary rivers and lakes with neighbor downstream countries. China's hydro-hegemony was made possible by its control over Tibet, which is the largest freshwater reserves outside the North and South poles. China's upper riparian status allows China to alter and restrict water flowing from its territory into India and other countries in Southeast Asia when it comes to the Mekong River. India, on the other hand, functions as a middle riparian state because India is a lower riparian state in relation to China, but it is also an upper riparian state vis-à-vis Pakistan and Bangladesh. For India, the Brahmaputra River is key to its socio-economic development. The river provides India with 30% of its freshwaters and 40% of its hydropower. For China, the Brahmaputra's role in its total freshwater supply is limited, but it plays a significant role in Tibet's agricultural and energy industries. From a more conceptual standpoint, in the absence of a treaty and in the absence of a river basin organization, the upper and lower riparian states make incompatible claims about their water rights. Indeed, the upper riparian states invoke absolute territorial sovereignty to use waters unilaterally regardless of downstream concerns. On the other hand, the lower riparian states invoke absolute territorial integrity so that the upper riparian actions must not affect water flowing downstream. For example, one can mention the gigantic Medog hydropower project, which is situated about 3 kilometers away from the India-China border, where the Tsangpo River enters the Arunachal Pradesh region. The Tsangpo River is the Brahmaputra's name in China. The construction of this Medog hydropower dam has recently been proposed by China at the famous location called the Great Bend, as you can see on the map, and it is expected to generate 60 to 70 gigawatt. Then, another example, in 2020, China diverted the flow of the Galwan River in response to border clashes with its Indian neighbor. So those are examples showing how China adopts hydro-hegemonic behaviors towards India in connection with the Indus River system and the Brahmaputra River. Okay, so we've looked into the relationship between China and India when it comes to the way they fail to cooperate for the management of their shared rivers, the main ones being the Indus River and the Brahmaputra River. Now let's look into the Mekong River. In 1995, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam signed a treaty instituting what we call the Mekong River Commission, which is, by nature, a river basin organization for the Mekong River. The problem being China, despite being the source of the Mekong River, refused to join this river basin organization and only participates as a dialogue partner. The Mekong River, which is also called Lancang River in China, originates high in the Tibetan Plateau. And the Mekong River is one of the world's longest and most important rivers. It flows from southwestern China into Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The Mekong and its many tributaries, as you can see on the map, are the economic lifeblood of 60 million people in Southeast Asia. To date, China has built 11 mega hydropower dams along the Mekong and plans to build more. These dams have had disastrous environmental consequences and have contributed directly to severe droughts and food shortages in lower riparian states. China regularly leverages its upper riparian status in its relations with downstream nations. The US has recently tried to counter Chinese pressure on downstream countries in the Mekong Basin, but it is difficult to outbid China when Beijing can use water as a bargaining chip. China's leverage as a non-restrained upper riparian state enhances its geopolitical influence and reduces the likelihood of a comprehensive multilateral agreement for managing the waters of the Mekong River. China uses the dams for political leverage by increasing the amount of released water when they want to improve relations with downstream countries. In other words, they use diplomatic blackmail. Moreover, China is planning to make the Mekong wider and deeper by dredging rocks in northern Thailand. This would turn the Mekong into a passage for China's massive cargo ships and military vessels by providing a path that would stretch from the Yunnan province to the South China Sea. As a conclusion, China, unlike Egypt, definitely shows and displays all the features and characteristics of a true hydro-hegemon, which refuses to sign any transboundary river management treaty with downstream riparian states and uses its upstream position to obtain political and diplomatic gains from downstream countries. Have a great day.